Hey guys, good morning and welcome to another episode of Motorcyclist MC Commute. You guys know the deal this morning. We're going to be riding to the Motorcyclist office in Southern California on Honda's 2020 CRF450L. So let's throw the helmet on and go for a ride.
Alright guys, here she is, Honda's 2020 CRF450L. This is a street legal dirt bike, also known as a dual sport bike, from Honda Motorcycles. It is based off Honda's legendary CRF450R motocross bike. Honda was a pioneer in the 450 motocross class, unveiling that bike, I think, in 2002 model year. Fast forward to today, and they finally have a street legal version with headlight, taillight, turn signals, and mirrors in the 2020 CRF450L. I love the styling of this bike. You can see the CRF450R's frame, swing arm, engine, body panels. Yes, it's a little bit wider in the radiator area, but I love the look of this bike. I love that bright LED headlamp that is brighter than setups people used to race Baja with 2 decades ago. Very pretty looking motorcycle, and if you're someone who wants that motocross experience for the street out of the factory, you can't beat the CRF450L. Enough talking about it. Let's swing a leg over it and see what it's like to ride. Alright guys, a mechanical key. Thank you, Honda. Just like the CRF450R, this engine can be a little bit stubborn. You can tell that it runs very, very, very lean. Ergonomically, this bike feels, well, no surprise, like a dirt bike. A lot of leg room, nice, wide, tall handlebar. Like we said, she's a little stubborn. A lot of leg room, nice, tall handlebar. The seat it's a dirt bike seat, so it's thin, not very well supportive, but if you're the kind of person who wants that sit on top of the bike, lean the bike over and stay centered type of riding experience, this 450L delivers. And the coolest thing about this bike is just how easy it is to zip around town. It's nice and thin. It's very agile. Yes, it weighs considerably more than the motocross bike. I think 42 pounds, if you can even believe that. It's still exceptionally agile. Guys, we've got school in session now, so we've got a little bit of traffic here. Let's try to scoot in between these cars and use the maneuverability of the CRF450L to our advantage. Little power wheelie out of the bike. This is a very playful motorcycle. If you've ever ridden dirt bikes, you just understand how light and how playful and maneuverable they are. And that kind of performance is what you want in a little motorcycle. It just makes riding fun. Suspension-wise, this bike has a coil spring fork. Now, many years ago, Honda played with its air fork, its KYB air fork, which I think they introduced for the 2013 model year on the CRF450R. Well, the air fork was great in concept, but it didn't really work that well, especially on the dirt. For a road application, the air fork actually works pretty decently because the air fork is able to respond to the slower undulations of the road in a good way, where it can't really on the dirt, but on the road it can't. But you're not going to use a dirt bike on the road unless it's a dual sport bike or a supermoto bike. Anyways, Honda ditched the air fork, they went back to a coil spring fork, and that's what this motorcycle has. Now the suspension on this bike is very, very capable, and it's a more racy suspension setup than we typically see out of Honda, especially for a road-going street bike. We rode this motorcycle off-road extensively a couple years ago in Moab, Utah, and it was very striking how stiffly sprung the suspension setup is on this bike. If you're someone who likes to whale, go off jumps, ride through the desert, go fast, you're gonna like the suspension on this bike a lot. However, if you're riding in, you know, rocky stuff, real slow going technical terrain, the suspension's gonna beat you up on this bike just because it's so stiffly sprung. We spent some time riding this bike at my friend's arena cross track, or it's a kind of arena cross track in his backyard. And here at that track where it's smooth and it's got some jumps, the suspension works really good on this bike. Other manufacturers' dual sport bikes are definitely more softly sprung. We got it, guys. And that's what I like about this bike. It's just how rigid the chassis is for a dual sport bike. Again, if you're riding in the rocks and the technical stuff, you're not going to like the suspension on this bike. However, if you're whaling, you are. Also like the ability to release the air pressure in the fork. There are screws atop the fork leg so you can relieve the pressure in the fork. I don't know why all motorcycle suspension doesn't have that feature, even street bikes, but I'm happy that this dual sport bike has that feature. Of course, the suspension is adjustable with compression and rebound damping. The shock also offers high-speed compression damping circuit and preload, so you can get the sag set up right. For these dirt bikes, it's generally pretty important to get the sag set up, because the sag really defines the attitude of the motorcycle. And if the motorcycle doesn't have the right attitude, you're not going to be able to whale on it as hard as you would if it wasn't set up right. You know, if it's too low in the rear or too low in the front, it's going to affect the handling and make the motorcycle more difficult to ride. So if you're riding these motorcycles, it's always really important to, you know, at least kind of baseline the sag. Super nimble motorcycle. For running around town, this thing just kicks butt. Engine. This 450L is powered by Honda's 449cc Unicam single. This is the same power plant that powers the CRF450R. Now, because the CRF450R is a competition engine, it's built for competition, it's not built for street biking or for durability or for being run on the freeway, Honda had to make some changes to the engine. Most notably is the engine is detuned. It feels noticeably slower than a motocross bike. On the dyno, it makes around 38 horsepower, where the motobike will make, you know, upwards of 50, around 52 horsepower. So about 14 horsepower less than the motobike. And that's okay. You know, this motorcycle is designed to be used every day, where the motorbike is designed for straight racing. Now, Honda made some important modifications to this powertrain to make it more comfortable on the road, and so it could actually pass EPA noise and emission standards here in America. The engine covers have damping material inside, so the engine actually is a little bit quieter than the motorbike. The sprockets have a clever rubber coating which reduces noise as well. Of course, this bike has a 6-speed transmission, where the motocross bike has a 5-speed, this one has a 6-speed with taller final drive gearing. This motorcycle is totally capable of 90 miles per hour speeds on the freeway, but really not much beyond that. The engine also vibrates a lot. You feel a lot of vibration through the handlebar and through the seat, through the foot pegs. But again, this is a moto bike, so this vibration is not off-putting. It's the way it goes when you're riding a dirt bike on the street. These IRC tires, they're not totally terrible. They have pretty decent grip on the dirt. Pavement, they're okay. They're not the best tire, but they're certainly not the worst. I like these tires too because they're not exceptionally loud. They don't have a crazy hum. We rode the Honda Africa Twin with the Metzler Karoo tires recently, and those tires actually had a louder hum than these IRCs. Of course, this bike rides on a 21-inch front and 18-inch rear wheel. That wheel combo is so significant because that is an off-road tire combination, so you have access to the finest off-road tires. Nowadays, the street bike tire world has engineered really high quality road bike tires in 2118 fitment just because of the proliferation of the 2118 ADV bikes. But to be fair, I think the wheels on this motorcycle are too narrow to accommodate that street bike rubber, but you'd have to check. These tires are tube designed, so inside the tire there are tubes. No cruise control, no adjustable power modes. Adjustable power modes, well, the CRF450R does have adjustable throttle mapping, but none of that is on this bike. It's just run what you brung. I like this rectangular face LCD display. It's easy to read, it's right in your face. It has fuel MPG information and a low fuel light, so you know when it's time to fill up the 2-gallon titanium stamped fuel tank. We've been averaging around 42.2 miles per gallon on this bike. Isn't bad. Mirrors, I like the shape of the mirrors. They have a good shape. You can really see what's behind you, but because of the engine vibration, it's hard to really make out what's back there. We talked a little about the ergonomics and the Renthal handlebar, how nice and wide it is, how you have a big commanding stance with your elbows up. I also like the foot pegs. Foot pegs are reasonably sized. Up until recently, motorcycle manufacturers would always really fit teensy-weensy foot pegs, which isn't such a big deal if you're riding on the street, but when you're riding off-road, you want a big foot peg, something you can stomp on when the going gets rough, and this bike has well-proportioned foot pegs. Let's pass this guy. When you start getting at higher speeds, the bike gets a little bit wobbly, but we can live with it. It's a motorbike for the street. Cable actuated clutch. I like the action of the clutch. Has decent feel, good engagement point. Here we go, guys, a turn. This thing doesn't handle so bad on the road for having dual sport tires. Still riding this thing on the moto track or off-road in faster terrain is where this bike really belongs. Alright guys, we're in top gear, 85 miles per hour. The bike does get a little head shaky at this speed, and there is a ton of vibration, but that's okay because we're riding a dirt bike on the freeway. How cool is that? Maintenance wise, because this engine is based off a competition spec engine, you're gonna have to do some maintenance on this thing if you ride it a lot. Honda says that oil changes are required every 600 miles and valve checks every 1,800 miles. 600 miles for oil change? That in dirt bike terms is around 30 hours. So after 30 hours of use, they ask you to do an oil change, which really isn't that bad. 30 hours of time on the engine for oil change. You know, in the off-road world, 30 hours between oil changes is a lifetime. No one does that. I mean, I would because I'm lazy and I only change my oil on my dirt bike once a year. But maintenance schedule is not that bad for a competition-based power plant. Alright guys, we're going to sign off for now. We'll check in back with you guys when we're exiting the freeway. We're on the boring freeway slog. I wish I had cruise control. Well guys, we made it. I'd be lying if I didn't say that was an uncomfortable freeway slog. This bike vibrates like crazy. And the engine heat. The engine puts off some heat when you're riding it at wide open throttle and top gear. As you can see, the MPGs went down to 36.2, and top speed on this motorcycle is 88 miles per hour. That's when the rev limiter chimes in. Oh my god, that was uncomfortable. I would not recommend this bike for freeway commuting at all. Love that clutch. Well guys, that was our 2 gallons of fuel. We just burned her all up. Yes! Brakes! This thing has hydraulic disc brakes front and rear. The front brake is decently powerful. There's a lot of pitch on this motorcycle. Obviously 12 inches of suspension travel, you're gonna have a lot of pitch when you're on the gas of the brakes. No ABS, so you gotta be careful. Yep, she really is good. Yep, real good. No stupid traction control or dumb rider aids to turn off. This thing is a full manual experience, thank God. Yep, love no ABS, backs it in good. For urban riding, even if you didn't ride this bike in the dirt, if you just rode in the city and never had to get on the freeway or go more than 20 miles at a time, this bike would be awesome. But for freeway use, it's just insanely uncomfortable. Alright guys, we're here at our office, the Motorcyclist HQ in Southern California, world renowned. Well guys, there she is, Honda's 2020 CRF450L. For 2021, Honda's actually adjusted the naming convention of this motorcycle. 2021 Ford, it's the CRF450RL, and they did that because there's going to be some confusion. The CRF250L, that is in no way, shape, or form even close to this motorcycle. That motorcycle is an entry-level dual sport bike, extremely entry level. This thing, on the other hand, this is an R bike. So even though the name doesn't say R right now, it's an R bike. It's got the CRF450R engine, chassis. This bike you can wail on. You can wail on this bike. You can ride it exceptionally hard. The CRF250L, on the other hand, you cannot wail on that bike. That is a novice bike for novice dual sport riding. Alright guys, let's do some Q&A real quick, straight to the top. Why didn't Honda make this with the CRF450L reliability and maintenance intervals? They didn't because it's a competition spec bike. It's amazing that Honda was able to retrofit their competition spec engine and make it street legal. That is an amazing feature. Good job, Honda. I keep hearing negative things about engine oil capacities and oil change intervals. What's the real deal? We've talked about this. Comp spec engine, 600 mile recommended oil changes. Because it's a Honda, it's going to go the distance. I have a CRF450R 2016 supermoto bike. That's my personal bike. I ride that thing pinned all the time. I change the oil one time a year. So you figure it out. Alright guys, nice. You should do the review in road tires. That's a great question. These IRC GP tires, they have some squirm to them. You can't really wail on the pavement on these tires, but they're a good compromise. It would be cool to fit some road bike tires on here and see what it's like to ride. Nice way. The best way to commute, IRC Moto. Good job guys. You know what's up. Good value proposition on the IRC rubber. Can one install an auxiliary oil cooler for longer oil change intervals? I bet you could do that. You know, I'm no mechanical whiz expert, but you could absolutely retrofit an auxiliary oil cooler. The deal is, if you have more oil capacity, you have more lubricant running through the engine, and your service intervals theoretically could go a little bit longer. So yeah, that'd be cool. Could this qualify as your only bike if you lived in the city or an urban area? Absolutely. If you're going to be going on the freeway, this bike is horrible. Yet, if you're going to ride around New York City or ride stoplight to stoplight, this bike is totally bearable. And in an apocalypse, you can just jump the curve and drive up and down cars and go off-road and, you know, catch some fish and do whatever you have to do. Yes, this bike could totally qualify as your one bike. How tall are you and how high is the seat? This is a great question. I'm 6 foot tall. The seat height is insanely high. I'm on my tippy toes sometimes. If you're a short person, you are going to have a hard time riding this motorcycle. Of course, you can lower the suspension. You can get an aftermarket seat or cut the seat to make it lower. So there are options for you to make this motorcycle more rideable if you're a shorter person. All right, guys, that's enough Q&A. Would I spend $10,400 on this motorcycle? That's $1,000 more than the CRF450R competition bike. I probably would buy this bike. It wouldn't be my only bike, but I just love, I've always been a CRF450R fan. I've owned a couple of them over the years, and I've just been a big Honda motocross bike. Their bikes are always fast, they're gnarly, they're durable, they are performance-minded bikes. And even though there are some dual sport bikes that do it better than this bike, there's nothing like the way a Honda looks, the way it sounds, the way it feels, the way it works. Other manufacturers' dual sport bikes, they're going to wear out real quick. This thing, it ain't going to wear out. Good job, Honda. If you guys want to know more, make sure to check out our website, motorcyclistonline.com. That's where all of my written content goes. Subscribe to our newsletter. And thanks for watching, guys.